Welcome to Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, a podcast that illuminates real solutions to common problems within the parking industry. I'm your host, Brian Wolff, CEO of Asura Technologies, and in each episode, I'll introduce you to real parking pros that will bring their own tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. On the show today is Todd Tucker, the president of Parking Logics. Todd Tucker, and I'm going to get all these letters in here, JD, DBA, MBA, CAP, and CPP. There's probably others that he's not telling us about because he's a humble guy, is a 31-year veteran of the parking, transportation, mobility, and mobility industry with a passion for learning, clearly, innovation, and the digitization of our industry. He spent 20 years in parking operations, 11 in a broad variety of tech subjects, everything from parking payments to parks to EV to AI and beyond. And as of 2025, he will have participated in taking 2 parking companies to transactions. Todd is also a veteran of the Marine Corps with a true passion for anything and everything to do with helping veterans. And like Pat McAfee, Todd is a proud West Virginian and hopes to go back to the mountains for good one day. Todd, welcome to Harder Than It Looks.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate all that. Very kind words.
Well, I have to tell you, you're probably one of the guys that could have one of the longest bios, and you had one of the shortest bios, which I think says everything about Todd Tucker. One of my old bosses used to refer to guys like you as smoke under the door.
Wow. That sounds very surreptitious and special forces like.
Very subtle. The smoke is coming in and it's deadly, but it is very quiet and it's going to get you, but you don't know it's going to get you until it gets you. So that is, I think that's quintessential Todd Tucker for sure.
I appreciate that. That's interesting. I've never heard that analogy before. That's an interesting one. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. So to kick this thing off, I'm going to ask you to be a little more verbose about your background.
Sure.
If you've listened to any of our podcasts, you are podcast number 23, proudly. And what I like to do with my guests is I like to hand them the mic. I ask them to go back as far as they'd like to go. And I ask them to sort of bring us forward with each step. And ultimately, it's going to end up where you are today. But it'll just give us, I always learn something about my guests when I ask them to sort of take me back through their history. So the mic is yours. Go back as far as you want. Tell us the Todd Tucker story.
Well, first, thanks for having me, y'all. This is really it's honored and humbled to be invited on here, and I think you guys are doing a great job with this podcast. I have enjoyed watching some others and listening to some others, but it's funny. The older I get, the less I like to talk about myself. Probably enjoyed talking about myself a lot more when I was younger, but I don't ever want to be that guy that sounds arrogant or is being boastful. But no, I humble beginnings. Grew up in a small town in West Virginia. I'm very loyal to West Virginia. It gets a bad rap, but it's actually a great place to grow up, great place to retire. A little hard to work and have a job there unless you're in coal mining or something like that. But very proud that I came from there. Very good people come from the hills of Appalachia. They're not the crazy rednecks you think they are. So grew up in a small town there called Huntington, West Virginia. Joined the military. I'll even go back further. Went to a private Christian school most of my life. When my first foray into public life was in high school, which was it's a hell of a transition to go from private Christian academy and then the ninth grade to get thrown into public high school. Got beat up a lot, shoved into locker, got a wedgie. He didn't, that kind of stuff. It took me a while to find my way, but it's just me and my mom most of my life. My dad and I reconnected as I got later in life, but growing up was really just me and my mom. So I joined the military. Yeah, served with the Marine Corps during the Gulf War. My mom always said that the guy that left to go to the Gulf War was never the one that came back. So she's never seen the one that left. But a new person came back, and I guess that's a compliment saying I grew up a little bit. probably a little bit of a shithead, like a lot of, teenagers. I joined at 17 and was already in war by the time I was 18. Came back and, started college, went to college at Marshall University in West Virginia, and studied business. Didn't do particularly well because I was too busy trying to be in a fraternity and can't make up for lost time while I'd been overseas. Basically was just treading water. Ended up in Florida, and in Florida, I had gone down there to try to do a family business with my sister. That didn't work out. But I ended up, seeing an ad in the paper one day for a parking garage job. For those of you under 35, people used to look in the newspaper for jobs. They didn't just pop up on your phone, that you carry around in your pocket. So found a job, responded to this ad. It was Jason Finch and like Robert Sizik and Todd Brocious on the other end of that, who are obviously, anybody listening is probably been around parking. They've heard those famous names. And got a job with Central Parking, running a parking garage in South Florida and Coconut Grove, Florida. The Streets of Mayfair garage, if anybody from the Miami area, still there today. And the rest is history, as they say. I intend to do that for a hot minute, and it's 31 hot minutes, 31 years of hot minutes later. Here I am. I've very much enjoyed being in this industry. Stayed in Florida for a number of years. Ended up in Michigan and Chicago and San Francisco over the last 3 decades, and I've just, it all came home 3 years ago when we moved back to Florida. I'm literally right up the street from where it all started for me. Yeah. Along the lines there, was working for Central Parking, which is now, of course, SP Plus Metropolis. Was at ABM for 6 or 7 years. Was at Town Park for a couple of years, and then was proud enough to be part of the original crew of ParkWiz, which became Arrive, which is now part of Flash. And then, and then the journey sort of ends up where I'm at now, which is coming up on 2 years with Parking Logics and doing the parking guidance, occupancy, wayfinding thing, which was an area I hadn't been in prior to this, and it's been fun. And back in Florida and doing guidance systems and having fun.
That's awesome. And then along the way, you collected a couple of degrees during that time too. Did you not?
I did my MBA while I was in Michigan. I don't know. I think a funny parking story for people who are in the Rust Belt or in the unionized markets. I remember I was one of the originals so Central Parking won the contract for the Detroit Metropolitan Airport when it was brand new and opened in like 2001. It was this giant, huge state of the art. It was like, I think at the time it was the largest contiguous parking garage in North America, or at least that's what I told people, because it sounded cool. And so I remember sitting there as this young parking manager who had been brought up from Florida, who had never sat in a union meeting a day in his life. And I'm sitting at a table across from these really angry Teamster guys in Detroit, the heart of Union Belt. And like, it was the most intimidating thing I'd ever been involved in. The lawyers on the union side of the table were being mean to me, and the lawyers on my own side of the table were being mean to me. And so all the lawyers were being mean to me. And I said, you know what? I'm tired of lawyers being mean to me. I'm going to go to law school, and now lawyers aren't mean to me anymore. So that was probably, that was one of my motivations, is just not being the dumbest person in the room anymore. I went to law school in Detroit, the University of Detroit, while I was still working in parking, and did night classes while I was working during the day. And I don't have kids. I don't have a big family or anything. So things like that become easier when you don't have other dimensions of your life that are obviously slowing you down with more important things like family and kids, which I probably should have had. But anyway, I did that, and then took a little hiatus for a few years, and then back around 2016, 2017, I got the urge to go to school again. And I went back to Temple University in Philly and did a doctorate in business there. And it was a lot of cool stuff about strategy and innovation. And right around the time I was really deep into ParkWiz. And so ParkWiz fed the doctorate fed ParkWiz. And we had a lot of fun doing some cool studies and things like that, doing academic research in the parking market. My dissertation was on a cannibalization of e-commerce channels in parking, which is a really very verbose academic way of saying, we did a study to see if selling your parking online in more and more places resulted in more customers, or if you just move the marbles around, the same numbers of marbles around into different channels.
Yeah. Well, what did you find out? Did you?
I was working for ParkWiz, so there may be some bias in that study that I have to admit, but I really tried to do it well, and it didn't seem to indicate that. I'll send you the paper if you're ever really trying to fall asleep at night. You can just start reading through that thing. But it did find that there were decent incremental gains by the more and more channels you sold on. It actually did result in more aggregate new customers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
There's about 25 people on the planet that would want to read that.
Yeah, I might. Maybe. Well, I might be one of them. You should send it to me. How many pages is it?
About 150.
Okay, so rather than an MBA, you've got a PhD. Is that right?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's even more impressive. So it's Dr. Tucker to me.
I just don't want to be that guy. No, I mean, if you put a gun to my head and said, "Do you have a title?" that would be accurate, but I don't ever put that into anything because, again, it sounds arrogant.
Yeah. Well,
and most people at this point in time are like, "Doctor, he's a lawyer and a doctor." God, that's 2 strikes against him. So I try to fight it more.
All right. So part of one of the questions I wrote down as I was digging into your background a little bit is, what's the source of the desire to learn? What's the source of the curiosity? Because, some people would just be satisfied with a bachelor's degree like me, and we'd feel like a slouch next to you.
That's not true.
So what was the kernel of curiosity? What drove you in all of these places? And then I'm going to make you go back to that Teamsters meeting because I want to hear how that ended.
It's actually a really good story.
I'm sure it is.
So I sort of a self-deprecating way, always joking. I've got some sort of an accomplishment complex that I'm always feeling like I need to be achieving something new. It's like part of my self-worth equation or calculus that I do in my brain. Just always trying to measure up and do better and do better. I don't know. You could probably trace that psychologically back to, something in my childhood, very Freudian, that I didn't quite measure up to somebody's expectations for me. But probably a more realistic answer is I just genuinely, we get older, we get wiser. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't do particularly well when I was doing undergrad, when I had all the opportunities in the world, when the military was paying for me to go to school and my dad would pay for me to go to school, and I had all this money. I was too busy, trying to meet girls and drink beer, and wasted a lot of time. And so then when I had to put myself through the rest of college, learning became much more interesting, and just always learning new things, trying to stay frosty, stay fresh. I'm actually looking right now at doing some emergency medical classes. I mean, I'm just naturally curious, I guess. I don't think I'm that unique in that sense. I think people, whether they've got time and the ability and resources to do anything about it, is what can be difficult, right? Like, you got 3 kids, and they're in there. You're taking them to soccer practice and wrestling practice and all that. When do you have time to do that? I just don't have the family, so it's easier for me to break off and say, I'm going to go get a license as an EMT just in case I need to save somebody's life someday. So
that's good. I'm going to stay close to you at parking conferences then.
Please do.
And please, if you can save my life. That's good. All right. So then did you go to ParkWiz right out of, you were at ParkWiz while you were doing your PhD? Okay.
Yep. I started that halfway. So I got to ParkWiz around 2015, 2016, and just exited a little under 2 years ago. And so, I did the PhD doctorate program while I was there. And, just again, the curiosity of, I think, what's interesting after being a parking operator for 20 years or 21 years, whatever the right number is, and then jumping into technology side, I would have thought on year 20 that I'd pretty much seen it all. And then I left and went to ParkWiz and realized how much, I didn't even realize how much moss had grown on my brain. And I'm surrounded by all these 25-year-old geniuses and coders, and, Ashish Dalal, who was the founder of ParkWiz. And then, of course, people like Dan Rorty came along, or Jonas Stern, these really smart, brilliant people that had worked in e-commerce. And this whole new world opened to me. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought I was ahead of everybody. And I'm like, I'm actually very behind. And so I think that's what motivated me to go jump back in and get some more education around technology and innovation and that type of stuff, and the strategy around leading a company with that type of stuff. So.
Yeah. And so in your background, you talked about one of the things you teased out was how hard it is to sell technology in the parking world today. So what makes it so hard? What do you think makes it so hard?
I don't know who said this. Maybe I said it, or maybe I stole it from someone and I've illegally copyrighted it. But I think one of my favorite things to say to people, especially my sales teams, is if you think it's hard to sell parking technology today, try being a buyer, right? Trying to be the person on the other end that's actually making a decision. Because
Yes.
there's so many people out there selling so many solutions. And it's funny, I get to do some consulting work every once in a while, and it reaffirms for me as I have those conversations with people outside of the industry or asking lots of questions about what's going on inside the industry, how fragmented and like, there's the lines are blurry. Like this
Yes.
company sells 3 things. This company across the street sells 5 things. The company down the street sells 6 things, and they sort of overlap, but then they don't overlap. And it's such an intricate network. I think it's hard to sell technology because I think that there's a lot of companies out there with sales messages that are similar. They sound the same as everybody else. We know that there's at least a decent amount of those companies that aren't able to deliver. I mean, Parker is one of the top names in the company. I'm sure you've got upstart companies who are saying they can do things you can do and they can't. And they're looking for an MVP contract where they can get a minimum viable product to get their foot in the door, and then they'll build later. And I'm not saying that's a bad strategy. I'm just saying it makes it harder because almost everybody I know now who's a parking technology purchaser has at least one horror story of making a choice, choosing a vendor, choosing a technology partner that was not able to deliver what they said they were going to deliver. And maybe they never delivered it, and maybe they delivered it very late. And so now we've got these people out in the marketplace that you're trying to sell technology to that has scar tissue around that subject. And so now it's even harder, right?
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me the other day, why do you think that relationships in parking are so important? And we talking to investor group X who's thinking about making investments in parking. They're like, it seems like relationships in parking are much more important than maybe other industries. Why do you think that is? And I said, I think it comes down to the fact that at the end of the day, people make decisions based off the relationships because it's the only variable they can really control.
Yeah.
If I've used Parker a million times, and I know Brian has never let me down and Brian has never lied to me, I'm going to revert. It's going to take an act of, the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ to get me to move away from Brian because there's too much risk of unknown with other folks. That's great for Brian, really bad for the other companies that are trying to get a foothold, right? So I think relationship plays into that so much. The relationship's so important in parking. I think it's more. I've spent 31 years here, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think if you polled, I think people would spend a few years in parking would say it's more important here. And I think that, technology is hard to sell for those reasons.
What's so interesting is any operator that I have on the podcast, one of the questions I invariably always ask them is, how do you choose the technology and how do you know what to choose?
Right.
And because it is really hard from my perspective to back to your point about how fragmented it is and how, everybody does a little bit, but they don't do it all. And then of course, all the people that are trying to do it all, some of the things kind of work, they don't really work. And
Right.
so for me, I've always been a big fan. I grew up in technology, right? And I've always been a big fan of, we should figure out as technology vendors how to stitch the back end together so that the consumer can have choice about what they deploy, but the back end, it all just works together. And that's even harder to do, or that's just as hard to do. But we as the industry, as the technology providers, should be helping our customers cope with the technology changes.
That's right.
I think if we can get there eventually, I believe that the parking industry will be better off if we can, behind the scenes, get together and start to stitch some of this stuff together, frankly.
I couldn't agree more. I think that the lack of that has created more long-term problems for everybody. I think doing that work is hard. It's laborious. It's complicated. It's expensive. And sometimes it seems like there are other shiny objects on the hill that you want to go chase after. And I've been part of those types of decisions. You're trying to decide, should we do everything Brian just said, or should we go chase this new partnership with, I don't know, Google or something like that, right? And often the shiny object gets in the way, and you start chasing things that pull you off of something like what you're mentioning, which would actually have much more long-term foundational implications to make life easier to sell technology and for people to use technology.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then on the parking logic side, is the primary solution that you have parking guidance?
It is. So Parking Logic's a 10-year-old company. We just hit our 10-year anniversary this past year.
Congratulations.
And yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, big milestone. We're part of a traffic company, which has been around for 20 years. So, it's interesting that traffic and parking have a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of crossover between the types of hardware and software that you can use in both, but they're also vastly different. And so the parking division has been growing separately from the traffic division for about 10 years. You know, I don't want to say we're the only ones doing this. That wouldn't be fair or honest, but we're not just selling like a one-trick pony. We've got AI cameras, we've got magnetometer sensors that can go above and below ground. We can do single space, we can do multi-space, we can do simple ingress egress. We've got LiDAR laser systems. We've sort of got an answer for any type of environment, and we've got a sort of a laundry list of different technologies. So we're never a one-trick pony saying, hey, we've got this, widget and it's going to work everywhere, because we know that just almost never happens in parking. Something that works in Nova Scotia doesn't work that well in Florida, and vice versa, right?
For sure.
So people want options, and they want things that work well. And so, with hardware, software, parking guidance, parking occupancy, wayfinding, space detection, people use whatever vernacular they want, but we're all sort of talking about the same thing, which is keeping count in a really precise, surgical way inside of a parking garage. And, I think the last thing I'd say about that is, before I joined Parking Logics, I thought that those types of systems were reserved for more with the casinos and hospitals, people with huge budgets. And the one thing I loved about Parking Logics is it has very reasonably inexpensive solutions. If you just want to get a good count, you can be surprised at how low the cost is to do it now than just a simple parking lot or a parking garage. You don't have to have a huge budget. And I'm not saying that as a plug. I'm saying it because, back to my earlier thing, is, this is like, parking counting is just one tiny dimension of a lot of dimensions of trying to digitize parking. And, it's funny talking to people who can't believe that many, many parking lots and garages in the country don't really know how many people are in their garage and in what areas at any given time. Think about an airline or a hotel or a restaurant. It just doesn't work that way, right? You got to know exactly who's in there and how many. And so the ability for us to have cheap, simple solutions, and again, it's not just Parking Logics. There's a lot of other companies that have come up in the past couple of years that have similar reasonably cost options, so people can actually get a good count.
Yeah. So you said a couple of things that I think are really important. So I can't imagine why everybody wouldn't want to buy some sort of parking guidance, to be able to pull into a garage and see red lights and green lights, rather than me driving up and down the aisle trying to find a spot. Please tell me where the spots are. That's number one. And it seems like it's hot and getting hotter. But I know that, going back to I remember one of the first speeches I ever heard Dan Rorty give around his experience with Groupon. And then it wasn't Orbitz. It was the other.
There was Groupon and, no, it was Orbitz. It was Orbitz. He and Jeff
Orbitz
were there together.
And his whole conversation about, publishing inventory. And, you want to talk about something antithetical to the way the parking industry views the world, right? Like they don't want anybody to know what's in their garage, if they know it all. So that's the other thing. But I remember just Dan's, that talk just lit me up, because I was like, that's exactly right. We've got to get eyes on and understanding of the inventory so that we can actually maximize the asset. So it sounds like Parking Logics is sort of on its way to helping people do that.
It's funny you brought up that. I mean, again, Dan, if you're listening, Dan's a dear friend, and we worked together for a long time at ParkWiz and Arrive and Flash. And I know he gave that speech several times at several different trade shows, and it was just one of the best. I mean, it really put Dan on the scene when he first joined parking 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, because he took all of his experiences from all the other industries, travel, online sales, other e-commerce spaces, and he applied it to parking. Like, here's where the other industries have gone. They're 9 steps ahead of parking. Here's where parking will eventually go to. And I think that really resonated with people. And it really resonated with me. I don't think I probably would have moved to a job at Parking Logic had I not heard those type of presentations, because the tumblers wouldn't have clicked for me the way they did after, people are using. I think we have a lot to learn. People always say, do you want to hire from inside the industry? Do you want to hire outside? And, for example, I think Michael Back from Plunk just hired a new chief revenue officer from outside the industry. And I was talking to him outside. I think that's great. get people in with outside experiences that can add dimensions, right? It doesn't have to just be a parking person. So get people with outside experiences because they bring this depth of experience from other things that we can benefit from.
Yep, for sure. I've always been a big fan of the fact that you have to marry technological experience with parking experience. Where I think technology companies get in trouble is they think that parking is easy, and so they're going to come in and just dominate parking.
Yeah.
And I don't need any parking experts. How hard could it be? Kind of thing, right?
Harder than it looks. It's a lot harder than it looks.
And so
Thank
you for that. And so, the marriage of those two things is really, really important. So it's really good. So, okay, so you sort of led us there. Sort of the next question is, where's parking headed? Like, what can we expect from parking? If you've got John Q. Public listening to this, because we're trying to do a little crossover, what can John Q. Public expect from the parking industry in the future? What do you see?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, again, back to some of those consulting engagements I've had in the past year, it's interesting to think about this. Having a lot of conversations with people and investors from outside the industry who are thinking about coming in. I think that, there's a post-COVID world that has created sort of a slew of new opportunity. I think digitization again and payments and cashless systems continue to be really interesting. I think the move towards, the continual consolidation and shift of things happening and data happening, being pushed to larger and larger platforms is going to continue to happen. I think parking continues to be, there's still some big question marks out there. I think we were all crazy on the EV train, a couple of years ago, and now EVs have kind of slowed and sort of paused. And so people don't really know. There's a lot of players trying to do the same thing. Like, where does EV go from here? Does it pick up steam again? Does it keep moving? I saw a report from McKinsey just a couple of days ago or a week ago that said that 30% of EV owners are thinking about going back to an ICE engine. These are big bets the industry made that seem to be perhaps at a moment that is, I'm not suggesting that McKinsey report is accurate. And McKinsey gets it wrong plenty of times. I'm just suggesting that there's a pause happening in certain initiatives that we thought were going to just be over and done with by now, right? It wasn't going to be even a thought anymore. But I think parking, I continue to hear parking as a savior of the commercial real estate market, where, Class A office buildings and things like that, or people are renewing their leases at half the size or half the space because people are working from home 3 days a week now instead of going to an office at 5. And so the transition seems to continue to grow. The number of cars hitting the market and still being sold, whether they're ICE or EV, doesn't really matter. There's still cars entering the road. I think the American love affair with the automobile is a very deep entrenched thing that is, despite the best efforts of some of your biggest cities to eliminate vehicles, it's like, it's like a gnat scratching a tank, I think sometimes. So I think the future's bright. I think for folks that have money to invest or that have ideas, I think, the good news is that parking finally crossed out of being the Luddites that we were 10 years ago and really resistant to technology. And we finally have crossed sort of that ravine, and we're on the other side where people are much more willing to accept technology. It's a good time but we still have a long way to go, right? Back to Dan Rorty's presentation. We have a long way to go to catch up to other analogous industries and where they are in their technology and innovation cycles. So I think you're going to continue to see the proliferation of technology. I think firms like yours and mine and lots of others, this is our time where we're really going to become a ubiquitous solution. And I think, as long as we can survive the noise, right? Because or the opportunity people are finding, new companies coming on the scene that say, I can do that too. And they confuse the marketplace. They confuse the buyer. As long as we can survive and make sure that we don't fall flat on our face with solutions that we're providing, I think there's a ton of opportunity for us.
Yeah, I agree. Relationships matter for sure.
100% on it.
And then we just have to deliver what we said we're going to do, frankly.
Yep. I love being here. I think, again, I still have to explain to my family and friends what I do for a living. Then I just park cars, but it's this indispensable piece of the economy that almost never goes away. And certainly has ebbs and flows for different reasons, but applying technology in this space with a lot of room left to grow that technology into it and lots of value to extract as landlords or asset owners or whatever. I think the future's bright for the parking industry, whether you're thinking about working in it or investing in it or getting a job in it or buying something from it. I think no matter where you fit, I think we've got good things to look forward to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Parking, there's a bright future for you in parking for sure. And the digital transformation is going to continue to plod along for sure. The only way we'll be able to really truly make sense of the progress we made is if you look backwards. And what I can tell you is, at the risk of repeating myself, but when I started in 2015, there were probably 10 lighting companies in the exhibit hall, right? And so, lights were the thing, and there aren't any light companies left. Everybody's put up the latest and greatest lights, but I'm happy to say that the industry has turned the page, and whether we've crossed the ravine or we're in the middle of the ravine, I might challenge you on one point. I'm not sure we're on the other side yet, but I think we can see the other side, and I think there's still plenty of execution left.
I don't disagree. Yeah.
All right. So we have to spend a minute on your career in the Marines. So first and foremost, thank you for your service. I tell people all the time, I did not have the guts to join the military, but tell me what you did for the Marines. And do you have any interesting stories that you can tell us about what you learned and or experiences you had while you were in the middle of it? So were you in Gulf War I?
Yeah, I was in Gulf War I, 1991. I served with the 1st Combat Engineer Battalion. We were all reservists out of West Virginia, which is sort of interesting because, most of the time when you serve in the military, you end up in sort of a melting pot of lots of different people from lots of different places. And once your service is over, you may have somebody in Alaska and somebody else in Miami and somebody else in San Francisco. But all of us were from, Cross Lanes, West Virginia, or the Huntington and Charleston, West Virginia area. And so to this day, we still get together like every year and have a reunion on November 10th for the Marine Corps birthday. And so, those guys are like my brothers and like family. And then we'd go back 33, I guess it's been 33 years ago that we were stepped off together. And so we all joined the reserves because we wanted to be cool and get money, but we ended up actually getting activated for actual combat maneuvers. And so we spent a couple of years, maybe a year or 12, maybe 15 months over there, something like that. We sailed over on the USS Tripoli. We came back on the Tarawa. Well, what are some cool stories? Did you ever see the movie Jarhead?
No.
Jake Gyllenhaal?
Maybe I've seen bits and pieces of it.
I tell you that I think a lot of the guys that I had the honor of serving with would say that our life there was a lot of jarhead that there's like just us sort of wandering around the desert for months at a time, trying to figure out how to wear a MOP gear, which is biological, chemical sort of radiation wear that running around the desert trying to breathe in a gas mask and trying to figure out how to do all this stuff. We were on the Tripoli when it got hit by a mine.
That's how we hit Tripoli.
Yeah, we were one of the only ships. There were 2 ships that hit mines out there and started to sink. And of course I think it was like 0500 in the morning, and we all woke up on the other side of the ship because we hit a bunch of sailors and Marines in the bottom of the ship died. We just happened to be lucky. We were in the top of the ship, and so we had this great medical corps berthing area in the Tripoli that we were berthing in, and because all the Marines had crowded into other ships, then we ended up in like terrible berthing area on the other ones. So our job, becoming engineers, we got to go up the highway of death. We did a lot of cleanup of unexploded ordnance and demolition and minefields and things like that. I don't remember where I lost my hearing in my left ear. I can't remember if we were training in the Philippines leading to the war, or if it actually happened during the war, but I'm completely deaf. For anybody that nearly knows me, they know I'm completely deaf in my left ear. Apparently C4 and explosions aren't good for your ears. Who knew?
Probably not.
So no, look, as far as what I'll say, this is that there are a lot of people that probably will listen to this podcast that that were in the most recent Iraq war, Afghanistan war, who saw far, far, far worse things than I saw. But, war's a war, made me grow up. If you had to go through a war, probably the Gulf War is the one to go through, with extremely low casualty rates and, just enough experience to make you realize what's important in life. But,
Yeah.
The more recent veterans, the younger veterans probably listening to this have seen much more action, and people are coming back really, with really, really terrible injuries. And so, yeah, I've got a real passion for everything veteran. Obviously, the Marine Corps and all my brothers there, special place in my heart. But all veterans, if I had a dream job, it would probably be doing something with veterans every day. Yeah, because I can tell you, as someone that's tried to get VA benefits or deal with, trying to do anything as you get out of the service, even transitioning out of the military into a job it's hard. And lucky and proud that we started Veterans in Parking, which Jeremy Duplessis and Doug Cram and a few other guys, we started that 5 or 6 years ago. I'm not necessarily on the board or anything in that anymore, but that type of stuff is what really gets me excited. Helping others and helping veterans has sort of been, one of the few narrow little charity areas that I feel like I can give back. So,
yeah. So what can we do to help the veterans? What's something somebody listening to this podcast could do to help veterans?
Yeah, and specifically in the parking industry, become a member of Veterans in Parking. And if you're hiring for jobs for veterans, if you're looking for people, try to, whether you use Veterans in Parking, which is actually a great resource to find veterans. Yeah. But, again, veterans, and it doesn't matter, male, female, whatever background they are, just someone that has veteran on their resume, and it can be any branch. It doesn't have to be the Marines, it doesn't have to be the Army, it can be Coast Guard, it can be anything. These are people that, decided they volunteered to serve. They left behind family and friends, whether they deployed or not, and it doesn't really matter. They signed a blank check that somebody could have deployed them. And they went off to, to represent the country in some way, shape, or form. And so that you learn a lot of discipline, a lot of organizational thought. You work well as a team. You learn a lot of stuff that I think makes them a real viable candidate. So, yeah, I would say people to seek out veterans. And if you're in the parking industry and listening to this, please support Veterans in Parking and help bring more veterans into the industry.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, we'll do that for sure. I have a soft spot, by the way, for Marines. I went to school at Michigan with a couple of Marines, and some of them were lifers. Of course, Ryan Givens with Parker is a Marine. And then a gentleman that I co-founded a technology company with back in early 2006. He reminds me a lot of you. Really smart guy, smoke under the door, but he was a Marine, and he signed up. One of my favorite stories, John Qualls is his name. He was actually in Gulf War I also. He went into the recruiting office. Picture this. He went into the recruiting office and he told the recruiter, he said, "There's only one condition for me to join the Marines." And the guy was like, "What is it?" He's like, "I have to leave the country."
Well, he wanted to deploy. He wanted to get that
he's like,
expeditionary badge.
I have to leave the United States. And I can only imagine that recruiter was like, "Okay, if that's the only thing I have to do for you, I have got a spot for you," which they sent him to Asia. And he ended up, he could type. He could type. And so because he could type, this was back in the 90s, right? Because he could type, the guy that was the commanding officer there sent him around to all of the Marine bases or all the military bases in Far East Asia to set up the computers. They've just gotten like this huge shipment of computers. And so he was the guy that went and set up computers. And so that's how he learned computers. And then we co-founded a technology company. He's a good guy. He's smart as a whip, just like you. So fun guy, but he's a Marine. So I love
the Marine hold a special place. My dad was a Marine, and all the guys I served with were obviously Marines. But, there might be like a year or two in your life when you're a young man where you get really territorial. The Marines are better than the Army, or the Army's better than the Navy, or whatever. Sure. But then, 2 minutes after you get out of the military, it's like all veterans served in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I know plenty of guys in the Navy or the Army or the Air Force that are 10 times the badass, a Marine. It's all about the people that were willing to serve and give up that time. And yeah, there's plenty of smart guys out there. And again, it's just there's a whole other work ethic that I'm not suggesting other people can't have that work ethic, and athletes do it. A lot of people like to hire athletes too, because they come from that disciplinary background, but it's sort of all the same thing,
Yeah, it's all the same thing. So thank you again, and
Appreciate it.
Simplify. I don't know am I allowed to say that if I'm not a Marine?
Sure, of course you are.
All right, very good. Okay, so let's do this. Let's move on to the lightning round, and I've just got a series of 6 questions that I ask all my guests. So
Hit me.
So first question is, what phrase is Todd Tucker known for? So in other words, if someone in the office utters a phrase and they know instantly that phrase originated at your desk, what would it be? What are you known for?
God, the one that pops in me, I'm gonna do a true service to lightning round type questions. I'm just gonna answer with the first thing that pops in my head. I think I've been heard saying over and over and over again, relationship over everything.
Yeah.
Relationship, default to relationship over everything. Meaning, I get a call from somebody, hey, we're gonna have to take a hit on this deal. We pissed off so-and-so. Our margins are gonna suck on this particular close. What do you think? And I'm like, the state of the relationship, because relationship over everything, right? So I've been big about always saying that in my career. You can fix margin on the next deal, but you'll never fix relationship if the relationship goes sideways.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Okay, relationship over everything. I can hear Todd Tucker saying that. So maybe we'll get a sticker for you. All right. So question number 2 is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done in your life? Not necessarily parking, in your life.
Geez, honestly, probably my years when I was trying to be to do amateur fighting and sort of MMA and Muay Thai competitions and things like that. And the reason I say that, of all things, is, going to college is hard, doing that stuff's hard. But the thing about being in a fight and being punched in the face is trying to think, it's like the Mike Tyson thing. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I'm not saying I was a good fighter by any means. My wife is probably giggling in the other room. I had so many injuries that we lost track of how many times I was in the ER with shattered this or broken that. But the thing that was always a challenge for me was that the idea of trying to control the uncontrollable. I mean, a fight is chaos, but you're trying to think strategically and in an organized way while you're being hurt and injured. And they're like, it's the hardest thing. I mean, people call fighters, dumb brutes. Somebody that is a good fighter is a genius, very much a genius in their own way. Because think about it, they're dealing with literally hundreds of thousands of variables that are changing per second.
Yeah.
All while under the very unnatural state of being hurt, being punched, being hit, in some way, shape, or form or fashion. So I have to say that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done, is trying to control my mind, control your thoughts, and stay physically in the moment without just like curling up in a ball and crying. Like that's hard.
Yeah.
That's the hardest fight by far.
That's fantastic. And so was this professional fighting that you did?
I fancied myself being a professional. It just never actually worked out that way. It was me doing a lot of training and trying to get into competitions and doing things. And like I said, if martial arts and combat sports was probably the best sport I was ever good at, and I was probably still a C- version of that. I mean, when it comes to like other sports, like throwing a ball, hitting a golf, I know you're a big golfer, Brian. You asked me to go golf all the time. I would absolutely get laughed off of the course. If it involves a round ball that gets moved from one place to another by the use of human interaction, I'm terrible at that.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of athletic skill around ball handling. And the only thing I was ever good at was throwing punches. But even then I was only like a C- version of it. So.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I learned something new about you today. That's awesome.
That's why I'm so pretty. If you look at the nose, it goes to the side there.
Your nose is perfect.
No, it's not.
It
broke a lot.
3 or 4 times. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay. So now what's the hardest? So go back. So maybe your job is hard today, but what was the hardest job you had in parking?
Wow. Hardest job I had in parking. I'd like to say, I think some of the hardest being in parking leadership. Well, let me say this. I definitely worked plenty of, working physically hard, parking cars, running cars and doing that type of stuff. I don't put that anywhere near, even like in your, it's the middle of summer in Chicago and the hotel is overflowing with cars and it's just mass chaos, or like the Fountain Blue when I was at Town Park. Like, these are chaotic parking environments. I still don't think that those types of those guys work really, really hard, and that's hard physical labor. But I think that like sort of dealing with harsh environments of at the executive level, has been some of the hardest things I've done. Like trying to navigate challenging relationships or environments that were unfriendly. I hesitate to stop short of saying any names or anything, but there have been several times in my career in leadership positions where my job was extremely difficult because of the environment I was in. And that was trying to be an executive and make strategic decisions and change things from the way it used to be to the way I was told it needed to be. Going home every day with your head held low and your psychology damaged and destroyed. I think now as president of Parking Logics, and you, Brian, as president of Parker and CEO of Parker, making decisions on the fly and trying with the weight of the world on you, and there's a million different directions you can go, and trying to figure out which decision is the right one to make. You know what I mean? I think that it's just to me, wanting to do a good job and wanting to make the right decisions and not screw up is so stressful, because I just don't want to be the guy that screws up and makes the wrong decision that either hurts somebody below me or above me or a partner or a customer or the company. And, more than once in my career, I've been thrust into those situations. And for me, that's harder just because I internalize that so much.
The bird corrects it. Yeah.
God forbid I make the wrong decision, because I will just beat the hell out of myself for months about it and never really could forgive myself. So give me a busy valet drive and running 1,000 cars any day over having to make tough decisions as an executive. For those listening who are valets or want to get into an executive position and be a CEO or a president, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Let's do it. We have our pluses and minuses for sure.
We do.
All right. So then if you could wave your magic wand and fix anything in parking, what would it be?
We win. Could wave my magic wand and fix anything in parking, what would it be? I think if I could wave my magic wand and fix anything in parking, it would probably be some of the negative forces that we all deal with around just sort of, in again, a lot of your big cities or LAs or Chicago, sort of this anti-parking environment that a lot of the government, let's just say the word, the governmental agencies push down on. And, parking is treated like a dirty word in many cases. You see cities going in outright combat against the parking industry and trying to force people to ride bikes and, use ride shares or go to the transit systems and all that. If we could eliminate if I could wave my magic wand in a perfect world and make some of that negativity go away, I think that's what I would probably respond with.
Yeah, no, it's a good answer. That answer gets said a lot in some way, shape, or form. So you were in.
Does it really?
Oh yeah, you're in very, very good company. We are all in some ways have bumps and bruises from those outside the parking industry that don't quite appreciate the work we do and the importance of our jobs and the importance of having a parking space, frankly.
Yep. And look at, we don't get it always get it right, but I think we do it a hell of a lot better than a lot of other countries. And I think we're very sensitive. And when, people in the parking industry, again, this is for anybody that's listening to the podcast, doesn't spend their day in parking. You got a lot of really good people that work hard and that are willing to change and adapt. But, like any industry, we're also not willing to get pushed aside and just if you've heard, everybody's the bad parking experience. It doesn't mean the parking industry is bad. It just means parking industry is hard. And it's hard to get it right every day. It should help.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So when you're not parking cars, what do you do for fun?
Well, these days, I've been trying to, obviously my martial arts career is over. There was a time when I was doing a lot of chess playing. I was playing a lot of chess and I think I plateaued. I couldn't get my chess rating past like 1,500 or 1,600. I feel like I plateaued and I got frustrated. So I was able to get up to what we'll call an intermediate level chess player, but I could never quite you got to get to 2,200 to be considered a master. I wasn't moving the needle past like 1,500 or 1,600. So I kind of took a hiatus. Please, for any of your viewers that hear what I'm about to say, I'm not a crazy gun guy, despite being from West Virginia. But I'm trying to do practice to do some firearm competitions, some precision shooting competitions now. So I tried new things all the time. I don't necessarily always do well at them, but that's been the thing that I've been trying to teach myself now is how to shoot a rifle and hit a target very far away.
How far are the targets?
So I've gotten pretty accurate at 3/4 of a mile. Oh, about 1,300, 1,400 yards or meters, if you were. But I was supposed to be going to a class this coming weekend, where we were going to start shooting up to a mile, but I'm not going to be able to make it now. So I have to wait till spring to go through that class. But it's fun. It's challenging. It's something I grew up in West Virginia shooting guns and hunting and things like that, but I never did it from a mile out. So.
Meters.
Or yards, I should say, probably yards.
But 3/4 of a mile. Like, can we see 3/4 of a mile?
You can with the right glass. I mean, it's like anything else, whether you're buying golf clubs or whether you're buying a rifle with a scope on it, it just gets more and more expensive, right? The quality of our toys, the value of our toys just keeps going up. But it's fun, it's challenging. It's in a lot of ways, Brian, I think about it, it's like golf. I'm a terrible, terrible golfer. See earlier comment, but it's what is golf? It's a bunch of tiny little fine movements that you have to refine your grip. And exactly the way we're shooting. Like if I move my hand this way or if I breathe that way, then everything changes. Like at the slightest little. So there's a lot of. I think of golf a lot when I'm learning how to shoot well.
Okay, well, when I'm holding a golf club in 2 days, I'll be thinking about shooting. Let's see if that works for me.
I've heard about you golfing. I'm sure you're doing just fine.
I'm consistent. But I don't hit the ball far enough to get in trouble. That is the positive to my game. So, all right. Last question for you. What are you most proud of?
Honestly, I think I'm most proud of 10 years, both with Parking Logics and with Rive/ParkWiz/Flash, bringing together a really good team. I think and I'll double click on ParkWiz for a while, and then hopefully some of the folks that were at ParkWiz with me will agree with this if they're listening in. It was really a lesson in, taking your time, picking the right people and getting the right combination of personalities and work ethic together. And, we just did a really good job. And I'm sure some of it happened by accident. Hopefully some of it happened, by design, but whatever the way it came together for 4 or 5 years there with the team we had together at ParkWiz/Arrive was just the perfect mix. And I needed to see that because I had never seen it that good before. And so now I know what it can be. Right. And I'm not suggesting that I've done it again, but we've done a pretty good job at Parking Logics, and I'm always searching now for that perfect team. And it taught me a lesson about, everybody gets up and every day, team this and a team that. But I mean, when you really do get the right team together, it's night and day, unbelievable what you can accomplish. And so it all comes down to team. And that's what I'm most proud of is again, not trying to take credit. A lot of it probably happened by accident, but presiding over an instance when a really, really amazing team came together and did transformational shit in the parking industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, team. I'm a Michigan man, so it's all about the team. So I get that for sure. All right. So I want to just give you one more chance. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that I should have?
You wanted to hear about the union story. I think I should finish that because
that would be great.
It was funny. A gun actually came out on the table at one time. Somebody actually, or at least they pretended to have a gun in a bag when they set it on the table. And so, yeah, that was a funny ending to that story. 3 months before I was in Florida, running parking operations, had no sight of a union in sight. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting across from angry Teamsters in a cold dungeon of a parking garage, and somebody brings out a paper bag with a chunk of metal and slams it on the table, and it's got a thing that looks like a gun inside there. And yeah, it was quite interesting. I think we actually, we got through that negotiation, but what a wake up call for going from a non-union environment for my whole career right into the bowels of the beast, as they say.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. there. So that was,
I bet you did.
Put a bow on that story for people that heard it earlier.
Yeah. Well, I bet you did. And I bet you found a way to tame the beast too.
you probably churned it, right?
I'm just going to say that the one guy that we negotiated with, I'm not going to say his name because she might have listened to this podcast, but he was a little crazy, but I found a way to make friends with him. You got to make friends with the crazy ones too. You got to have relationships. Takes a village, and there's always some crazy people in the village. So I had to figure out a way to have a relationship with the crazy guy as much as the sane ones.
Yep. You got to make friends with crazy. That will be a great place to leave this podcast. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Thank you for a couple of great stories. I can't wait to get this up, published so that the rest of the world can hear it as well. Thank you again.
That's a wrap on this episode of Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, presented by Parker Technology. Please leave us a review if you liked what you heard. Make sure you tune in next month as we continue to uncover tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. Bye for now.